Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the eminent key speaker for the event, Mr. Prithvi Shergill, Chief Executive Officer, Entamo, who will be joining us online through MS Teams from Singapore. Mr. Prithvi Shergill is someone who is passionate to enrich the experience of people doing meaningful work in fluid workplace constructs and anchors Entamo's People Experience business as Group CEO. He is an experienced corporate business leader with more than 3 decades of experience in leading the people agenda across the information technology and communications and other professional service industries. An alumni of University of Mumbai, he has served in leadership roles at companies like Accenture, HCL Technologies, Singtel, and AT&T. With this introduction, I request Mr. Shergill to present the keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Great. So it's great to see you all, and I wish I could have been with you all in person. I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity to exchange notes and sort of share some thoughts as you kick off this event. I think, in today's world, we talk about the change that sort of has emerged over the last couple of years, and in my world, actually, I say that the world is actually never normal. People talk about the next normal, but I think the world will actually be never normal. And I think that is something that as we sort of come to digest and absorb that, the fact that, many of you and NIA has taken the lead to sort of find time to reflect on some of the challenges that this never normal world brings, I think is very creditable. And as the eminent speaker before me said, I hope we find ideas to sort of address what I think will be the new ways of working, new workplaces, and of course new workforces. If I sort of sit back and look at our profession in HR for the last many years since my hair was black, and since I've been in this profession, I've heard many of my colleagues and in the community and myself debating about how HR can be a better business partner, how we need to sit on the strategic table, how we need to be involved in some of the key corporate decisions. And that's been a little frustrating because as a profession in which you are sort of committed to, I think you always feel that you are having the impact in an organization. So why is this always this feeling of, not being part of it has been sort of always very worrisome to me. And I think what the pandemic has done has finally opened the door very wide and permanently for the CEO or the CXO of any organization now to look at his HR leader or his CHRO to really be a key advisor to him on how to navigate through the future. The onus or the responsibility about what we do with this opportunity is really on the profession. Some of us will stay in the door and stay on the table and add value. Some of us will do so in a tactical fashion while things are difficult. But as people sort of adjust to the ways of working or the ways of how the new norm will find themselves slowly drifting away, and that will be, most unfortunate. But I think that's what will happen. The second thing that has happened is that the people agenda has suddenly become even more pronounced. If you look at the CEO role and you look at the CHRO role, there is research done which says that the skill overlap between what a CHRO needs and what a CEO needs is possibly the highest skill overlap compared to any other jobs in the organization at the leadership team level. So you will find that a lot of our CEOs, etc., are people who have evolved to that position through marketing or through finance or through operations, and that's very creditable. But I think the reality is that as they emerge into those roles, the CM, the person who's come through marketing or finance or sales or operations, finds that almost 30% of his time is spent on what I call people development or people agenda or the people agenda. So the need for him to or her to actually pick up those skills or to look for counsel in that space becomes very significant. Um, the world actually operate, as you sort of grow into your first job, second job, and hopefully grow your careers. Many of you in the audience will be thinking about that. I think it's important to remember that you have to have skills which whereby you can shift but between three hats. One is what I've just talked about, which is the people developer or people agenda, or managing the people agenda. The second is, of course, being a business operator, knowing how to run the business, what makes money for the business. And the third is what believe is really being a value creator, which is somebody who brings creativity, innovation, new ways of doing things to the table. So if you look at those three vantage points, any job that you do at whatever stage in your career, it becomes very important to have a point of view as to what you bring to the table as a people developer, as a business operator, or as a value creator. It can be right from I can set the strategy for how to grow the business 3x, or it can be I know how to build IP in the organization, or I know how to pay my people so that they don't leave the company. But the reality is, even as enter of the workforce, it can be simply I know how to work in a team. When I take on a KPI, I always exceed my KPIs. And when I'm given a task, I do the research to understand how best to do that work. So, regardless what career stage you are at, if you look at it through those three lenses, I think you have an ability to have a very meaningful conversation about how to add value in your career. And that hasn't changed in today's world. If anything, it's become more complicated. So, earlier when you said I'm going to work, you went to a place, you went to a location. Today, I, s- I said I'm going to work, and I got out of bed and came to my study to sit and give this session. And I still was running a little late, but so I apologize for that. But my point is, going to work is no longer about going to a place. The workplace today can be anywhere. Work from anywhere has become extremely has been become the norm now. And the workforce is not about just getting an employment letter, but it can be in various forms. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those things. So, the work from anywhere issue, the issue of should people come to work, should they come to work once a week, twice a week, should they all come back to work, has become a hot debate. And any of you who reading the newspapers these days will see how the questions about what's going to happen with the workplace sort of preoccupy all of us. The business leader is challenged because he wants to, he comes, many of them come from a generation where they like to see everybody sitting around them. They want to have face to face meetings, they want to know what you're up to today. On the other hand, we have a mixed generation workforce, many who are Gen Y, many who are baby boomers across the whole spectrum. Some of them who say that, why do I need to sit in and swim through Bangalore, given the recent floods, to reach work 5 hours later, to do 2 hours of work and then head back 5 hours because the commute is now I have to cross oceans to get to work rather than sort of be able to access work easily when I can put in 10 hours of productive work working from home. So I think the workplace has become a very big dynamic that we need to really think through. And we as individuals need to think through where are we the most effective, when is it effective for us to be with the team When is it effective for us to be collaborating as a group? When is it effective for me to be on a call like this on MS Teams and be giving you gyan? And when would it have been better for me to be there in person? These are all decisions that we all have to make. The second piece is really the workforce. And I've been saying this for a few years now, that every permanent job can be temporary and every temporary job can be permanent. And I think that sooner we all realize that, the better it is. Because, this question of I must have a permanent role, and today's world, organizations size up and down very, very quickly, depending on how business grows. So you could be in a permanent job, but you could be out or restructured or redeployed or resized, or laid off in very quickly. Similarly, you could be a contractor, but your skills may be so valuable that regardless of what is happening in the organization, you are mission critical and your job is completely protected. Actually, many times as a contractor, you could be paid more depending on the skills that you have. So the language of the workforce has really become the new currency, is really all around skills. So, what you pick up from your education today or in these programs that you are all doing, and how you translate that into the place of work, will really dictate what role you will play in the workforce. Your contract could be a variety of things. It could be a permanent role, it could be an internship, it could be a contract role, it could be a consultant, it could be a fixed term assignment, it could be a day rate, it could be a variety of models. More than that, if, for example, workforces will soon become not just people, but you will see more and more automation and robotics and robots being part of teams. There are today organizations, be it in warehousing, logistics, manufacturing, even in the BPO sector, where a lot of the work is being brought up, is being delivered through RPA or robotic process automation, and you have outcomes being managed by 1/10 the number of people than it used to be earlier. So the world of the workforce is also significantly changing. And last but not the least is really about work, right? What you do every day, what is required by the customer. There were projects that I remember many of my clients saying, "Oh, this is our 3-year plan to digitize the practices and processes that I run." In the last 2 years, many of those digitization projects have been accelerated and are being delivered over 3 months, because the need for suddenly to be able to look at what's happened to the education sector. There are countries, for example, in the Philippines, where I was recently, schools have been shut for almost 2 years. Now, what a teacher does, or and how they do their work compared to what a teacher would have done 2 years ago, is completely different. There are people who think that the only change of work has been that, instead of doing a meeting, we have to do it over Zoom or over MS Teams. But it is much, much more fundamental than that. Today, earlier, if you were selling, you used to say, "Oh, I'll take my customer out for lunch, or I'll take my customer out for coffee, and we'll build a relationship." Today, the ability to make a connection over a 4 by 6 screen in a 30-minute meeting is a very different skill than having coffee for 30 minutes and only talking about work after that. Now I have to jump onto a conversation. I'm talking to you all today, and then very soon I will be jumping onto another call with a client, and it sort of needs to be done seamlessly. So I think that is something we all recognize now as a new skill, and we need to sort of adjust to that. Um, so that is in those dimensions. If you say that, from a role perspective, I need to be a people developer, a business operator, and a value creator. If you put that on one dimension, because hey, we are all consultants and we have to have a 3 by 3 grid or a 2 by 2 grid to make sense. So if we put that on one dimension, and we put the workforce, and the workplace on the other dimension, what I will leave you with as an assignment, is really to think through that as a people developer, what do I need to do differently when it comes to work? As a business operator, what do I need to do differently when it comes to the workplace? So as a value creator, what do I need to do differently when it comes to the workforce and all the other combinations that come with it? If you look at that, if you look at your or if you look at your future with that lens, I believe it gives you a path to navigate to possible success and growth. The last point I wanted to make, and I don't know if we want to open up for questions and maybe allow you to sort of ask me things that maybe are more on top of your mind rather than just me sharing what I think is important. But the other piece that I wanted to talk about is how organizations are evolving. So while I've given you a framework or a thought around how to think about your role in organizations and how to think how it impacts the macro trends and at a micro level for each of you, you also need to think about how organizations are evolving. So I think when COVID first hit, a lot of organizations were in shock, and didn't really realize what to do. I think it's a credit to corporates and their leadership, because the way they sort of responded was, quite amazing and demonstrated the kind of resilience that organizations have built. So the first stage was really about responding, and that I think has gone reasonably well, and people have reacted well, and I think that took us through the first 2 years. I think the last half of 2021, I think organizations went into this phase of a reset and really saying, what do I need to do differently to continue to succeed in this never normal world? And I think some organizations who had invested in technology early have come out of the reset stronger. Some of the companies who had not invested in digitization and technology earlier are still struggling to reset and invest, because every business in the world today is a technology business. And that's something we all just need to recognize. As companies come out of reset, we have to actually reinvent what we do. Some of us have to reinvent what we do as a business. Some of us have to reinvent how we do business, but both the what and the how needs to change. If I take my own business at Entomo, we are essentially a work technology company or an HR technology company who enable performance transformation and talent transformation by using technology, analytics, and behavioral science in our product. But we actually offered our product to the Malaysian government to use as their public health app. So, like we have Arogya Setu in India, in Malaysia, my platform is used as My Sejatra, which is the public health app. So I had to reinvent what my product did to stay relevant to my context and my customer. So while I'm a work tech, HR tech business, when COVID hit in 2020, I felt a sense of responsibility to my society, but much more a sense of responsibility to the 300 odd people in my company, that I keep them occupied on work which was truly relevant in the current context. And we used our tech to actually build an entirely different healthcare business. Now that healthcare business with the Malaysian government, for example, is almost 75% of my total company's revenue. And I cannot think of a more significant reinvention than my own story. But I think every company will have a reinvention story to share as you sort of dig into that. The last stage of where I think we are all headed towards is really around reimagining the world and reimagining our role as to what we are going to be actually doing to add value in our future. And I think that reimagination stage, some companies are already reaching. Let's take, whether successful or unsuccessful, Facebook has become Meta, thinking that they will become a player in the virtual world or the metaverse. Is that going to be successful or not? I have no idea. But all the success to Mark Zuckerberg and what they do. If you look at the way Google or any of or Microsoft continue to reimagine the kind of work that they do, it's very, very, very interesting to see how organizations evolve from what they were to what they will hopefully become in the future. And I think our opportunity as students, as professionals, as teachers, as facilitators of learning is really to figure out where we can actually impact at each of those stages of that business model or business evolution. What do we need to do when we are in a reaction phase or a response phase? What do we need to do when we are resetting? What do we need to do when we are reinventing? And what do we need to do when we are reimagining? Um, so I think if you look at the world in that context as a sort of a fourth stage cycle, and you apply on top of that your individual focus of skills of being a people developer, value creator, and business operator, and you see how work and the workplace and the workforce changes. If you look at these, you sort of 10 dimensions and how they interplay with each other, I think that's the roadmap for success in the future. And, I'd love to sort of spend some more time with each of you to talk through each of those dimensions because the answer is not the same for me as it is for you. So each of us in this room will have a different roadmap. What I have to do will depend on my history, my skill set, my place in the world, which and it'll be very different from your context, your family, your networks, your friends, your skill sets, your experience, your expertise. So each of us have to build our own roadmap, and I think the opportunity to be in a safe environment like you are currently as you're completing your program and completing your education is to use the time to do that. As I always say, when you go for lunch next time or dinner next time with friends, don't talk about whether Shah Rukh Khan's going to come out with another hit or not. But spend half an hour talking about this. You may find it much more interesting and actually much more meaningful for your in the long run as to what is going to happen with your lives. And I encourage people to have those discussions because I find the roadmap that emerges from those conversations is very important. And the reason that conversation is important is to sort of wind it back up to the topic is that if you do not invest time in the great reflection, you will not rebound. There will be no great rebound for us as a country or as a society or as an individual. So if we all need to sort of reflect about our roadmap for the future, because if we reflect about what our roadmap for the future is, that's what's going to take us to where we want to be in the future and rebound and actually be back to the on the path to success. Otherwise, this business of plugging out of the workplace, resigning, finding new things to do, etc., will be done on the basis of very limited thought and very limited thinking around what truly is helpful to me to reach my personal goals or my collective goals for the future. So the time to reflect is very important. Please, I urge you to sort of maximize that and avail of that as you sort of go forward. I'm happy to sort of take a break and stop here. I hope that has been sort of leaves you with some ideas to sort of mull over. But I'm happy to take questions or Ruchika, if there's anything else you'd like me to do, I'm happy to talk about that. Otherwise, I will hand it back to you all to sort of take the agenda forward as you wish. Thank you all for your attention, and I can remain online and be available as needed.
Thank you so much, sir, for bringing your valuable insights to the table. You spoke about some of the most pressing issues, whether to work from home or office, if yes, how many days a week, or how the organizations are evolving, how dynamic are the human resources, be it the skill sets or the goals that they have, and how reimagining and reinventing is the key. as better, like you mentioned, as better at it as it would have been to have you amongst us here physically, it is our pleasure to have you amongst us even virtually. Thank you so much for taking out time and gracing the occasion. I now request the audience that if we have some questions, we can take up.
Hello?
So, sir, his question is how different it is to meet on a 4:6 screen rather than actually coffee conversations.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the person who asked the question has the best experience, because I assure you, when a person is on the screen and if you're not finding value in the conversation, you can just switch the screen off. But if I was there in person, you couldn't throw me out of the room. So clearly, you have being on a screen is a much more advantageous now to people, because why you can the need to be able to add value in the interaction, I think, has exponentially increased. Because if I cannot hold your attention on a screen, you can be playing on with your mobile, you can go off camera, you can go on mute and have a conversation with your neighbor. While if in person, it becomes much more difficult. So the pressure on the quality of the interaction, both ways, not the question that you asked, it needs to be as engaging as the answer that I give when I'm giving it off a screen, to make the quality of the interaction much richer, I think becomes much more of importance. The second piece, I think, that really big changes in a digital interaction is really my understanding of you as a person significantly reduces, because we tend to jump into the topic of choice, or the topic on the agenda much faster when you're on a screen. While if you're in a person, do you like coffee, would you like a biscuit, where are you coming from, how much what's the weather like where you are. Those conversations happen much more naturally. If I was to open my session and say, okay, let's do a virtual introduction of everybody and let's go around the room and do that, we'd be here the whole day. But to do that in a small room is much easier, to have a quick conversation to sort of break the ice. So I think the ability to do some of that also becomes a little bit of a difference. And there are many other dimensions, but I think those are the top two that come to mind. So I really appreciate that you asked a question, because if you hadn't asked a question, clearly would have meant that I haven't captured your interest at all. So thank you for making sure at least one question got asked.
Sir, I just wanted to know how HR industry leader dealt with great resignation in Singapore and how it was different than India.
So I think every country has seen this phenomena, which is, whoever figured out this word, the Great Resignation, if they had trademarked it, would have been a rich man and would have resigned himself and retired permanently. But, I think every geography has experienced it to some degree. I think things in India happen more intensely. Everything in India is a little bit more intense, right? So if there were five resignations in a company in another geography for the same kind of role, there were 500 in India. Just the numbers and the scale makes it more intense. I think the aspiration and ambition of the workforce makes it more intense. So a person, in India, to to stay would expect much more from the work experience that he's having than possibly, the bar for change to be able to sort of reverse resignation in another geography is possibly a little lower. I think in the Great Resignation in India also brought out the worst in our professionals to some degree, because suddenly greed sort of overtook everything. And the expectation of 100% increases, the amount of employees who would renege after accepting an offer has significantly increased in India. Now, is that good or bad? It depends which angle you're coming at it from. From the enterprise perspective, it is a very scenario in the kind of social fabric or kind of in professionalism that has sort of crept in. But if you look at it from an individual's perspective, hey, my skills are much more valuable. I want a share of your profits or your revenue much to a higher degree. So please reset my compensation to the levels that I expect it to be at. So it depends which angle you come at it from. I think you can justify, or I think as I said, things in India tend to be a little more intense. So we've gone to the extremes much more. So instead of finding a balance where it's fair to the enterprise and fair to the employee to basically sustain my continued employment with you, I think that has not happened. I think the other thing that has really changed is in more developed economies, people have the option of saying I don't want to work anymore, or I want to go to become more of a freelance worker, or I want to really pick up more flexible work and do a gig. While I think in India, given the pressures on need for income to maintain your livelihood, etc., responsibilities, etc., that people have, I think those options are still evolving. It's still early days. So people still looking at, they're still their job still is very important. While I think in other geographies, people have had options not to do a full-time job, but to find a portfolio career. So maybe sometimes a portfolio career actually has led them to even better livelihoods because they've been able to balance work life and integrate those priorities much easier. So I think there are lots of dimensions with which it's been different, but at the end of the day, the fundamental has remained the same. It is an opportunity for people to reflect on what is important, and if they find what is meaningful and important in their current place of work, they have built their careers and sustained their careers. If they find it has not been meaningful and their reflection leads to a feeling that this is not where I want to be and it has led to a resignation, whether great or not, we shall see, but clearly it has led to choices for people to make equally in other geographies as it has in India.
Thank you, sir. While I'm sure that many of us have a lot of questions to ask, but considering the paucity of time, I don't think so we'll be able to take more questions. But once again, I extend a very warm welcome to you and thank you so much for gracing our summit.
Thank you so much for inviting me and have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.